All right. A quick intro to the reading section. You will be reading 5 passages, and you will have 65 minutes for all of these 5 passages together. You can also expect 52 questions across these 5 passages. So the exact number of questions per passage might vary. Some passages will have more and some slightly less, but 65 minutes, 52 questions, 5 passages, right? So this is how your time is structured across the questions. And what is very interesting about the reading section, something that I like, is that you get a variety of topics that you will read about. So you will, if you see here, I have listed 4 topics, and the topic is not the right word. It doesn't do justice to the broad area that each one covers, but generally 4 categories. Categories is probably better. So you can expect 1 work of fiction. So there will be a passage, there will be for sure a passage that is drawn from a work of fiction or from literature. And then you can also expect what is called a US founding document, or a text in the great global conversation. And by that, we mean works on topics related to freedom, liberty, justice, and the authors of this text would probably be somebody well-known in the political arena. Imagine somebody from Mount Rushmore, that kind of person. Or it could even be someone more recent, maybe in the last 50 years. It could be somebody like Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi. And it's going to, it will deal with something very fundamental and related to liberty and truth or justice. For all the era that we are in today, with all the kinds of things that are happening, you might expect that some speeches that's news that you're seeing in your news feed today might actually end up on the SAT for a student years down the line. So that's what I'm talking about, right? And this could be a full passage or a paired passage. And what we mean by a paired passage is that they come in pairs, right? So you will have 2 passages, and they will both be dealing with the same topic, but they will most likely have a different opinion on that topic. So each passage would have its own take. They're likely to oppose each other, and both of them will present strong arguments for their side. So you will have to answer questions not just on each of those passages that compare both the passages. So this is what you can expect. Moving on, you can also expect a passage from the social sciences, and you can expect 2 passages from the physical sciences. All right. So, foundations or recent developments, it could be anything. And this is how the topics are drawn from. Okay. So now we are going to look at the kinds of questions that you can expect on the SAT reading section. So we have categorized the questions into the most frequently occurring buckets. So, and you will also you can expect questions in a certain order. The central idea or the primary purpose question will usually be the first question on a passage. And here they want you, they're essentially testing you on whether you have understood understood the main message the author wants to convey. Okay, the central idea. Then you have vocabulary in context questions. And here you have to identify the meaning of the word as it is used in the context given in the passage. And then you have what are called evidence-based questions. And these questions were introduced just a few years ago. Some of your elder brothers and sisters who had already gone to college by then would not have encountered these questions. And these were some of the changes that were made on the SAT. And I love the evidence-based question because it asks you not just to find specific information from the passage, but to also locate which part of the passage provides that information. In other words, which part of the passage offers the evidence for you to make this claim or assertion. And moving on, we have the inferencing questions, where you will have to make logical conclusions based on the information given in the passage, not on any other external information. And the kind of conclusion you'd have to make would not be explicitly stated in the passage. So you will have to literally read between the lines and connect the dots to form the inference. And finally, you have the information graph-based questions. So here you would be given some kind of diagram or a chart or a table or a map or so on, and you will answer questions based on this diagram. All right. So these are the kinds of questions. And one quick note is that the information graphic-based question does not appear on literature passages, right? On passages from works of literature or fiction and so on. So, but they could appear on the other types of other topics or the other categories of passages. Okay. So are we clear about the kinds of questions? Yes. Now that we've done our warm-up, I would like to share with you a few tips that you can apply on your reading comprehension, right? First is about time management. How will you answer questions on 5 passages in 65 minutes? Let's do the math. You've all done statistics class, so this arithmetic must be pretty easy for you. So you essentially have 65 divided by 5, which is 13 minutes per passage on average, okay, on average. And you're going to need some time to transfer your answers to the answer sheets, right? You have to color all those bubbles. So let's give that 1 minute per passage, which leaves you with 12 minutes for each passage. Okay, that's how I want you to time yourself. Again, this is on average. You might end up taking a little more for some passages and a little less for the others, but just keep this as an average. I would also request you to not wait until the end of the time for the section to transfer your answers. I recommend that after you've answered the questions on each passage, you immediately transfer the answers to the bubble up the answer sheet, and then you move on to the next passage. Okay, good. Now, which passage should you attempt first among these 5? The beauty of the SAT is that you can answer questions in any order, right? So which passage should you attempt first? Any answers? Do you want to type in the chat box as to what you would attempt first? All right. So I will tell you what I recommend. You should attempt the passages according to your strengths. So if, I'm sure you would be doing a lot of practice passages, and definitely there's a lot of material, official SAT material from College Board online as well. So as you do your practice tests, you will start getting a feel for which passages you like. Some of you might be more comfortable with the science passages. For some of you, it might be the literature passages or something else. So play to your strengths, okay? Pick the passage that you're most comfortable with and start answering. The reason is when you get that down, you will feel more confident when you proceed to the next passage, all right? Okay, what about the questions in each passage? Now, you should know that the questions that require an understanding of the entire passage, such as a central idea question, they will appear first in the list of questions, okay? But it doesn't mean that you must answer questions in the order that they appear, okay? Because the questions do appear in the same sequence as the information that's given in the passage, all right? And here's where different people have a different strategy, or they have a different comfort level, right? What I would suggest to you is, if you are comfortable with attempting questions in the order that they appear on the question paper, that's perfectly fine, if that is your comfort level, right? A lot of students are not comfortable with that. And let me explain why. Now, if you have always been an avid reader and you've read a lot of different kinds of material and you are a good writer, you can just take a piece of text and start from the beginning and crunch through, and then you will be able to start answering the questions. So you would read the entire text first, and then you would start answering all the questions first. And if that works for you, power to you. I'm very happy, and we will definitely encourage you to follow that method. Having said that, for many students, that is not the case. There is a certain level of, they might be more comfortable with math or science, and they might struggle with reading and with so much of reading under time pressure. And on the test, you might want to adopt a strategy that will get you more answers quicker, right? And more correct answers. So if you're one of those students, what we recommend for you is that you need not attempt questions in the order in which they appear on the passage. What you can do is, there will be some questions which have an explicit line number reference, for example, lines 35 to 39 or something like that. And there'll be some questions without explicit line references. If you see questions with explicit line number references, which you will, then you could try attempting those questions first by going to that part of the passage, if that's comfortable for you. So you'll have to try different methods to see which one is more comfortable for you. All right? Okay. So doing this, answering these questions helps you get more comfortable with the passage. Okay? So let me walk you through the formula. Well, there's not really a formula. It's not math, but there is a sort of a formula that we teach our SAT students for reading passages. So the strategy that we advise you to follow is, of course, first, choose the passage that you're most comfortable with. And then, if this works for you, okay, remember, not every strategy works for everybody. But for the vast majority of students, first, read the blurb. The blurb is a 2-line introduction to just above the passage. It comes in fine print in italics, and it gives you sets the context for the passage. So read the blurb, so you get an idea of what's the context for the passage. And then, if there is an infographic, just think of this as a pure data interpretation question. And you can attempt questions that are solely based on the diagram or on the chart, okay? If this is something you're comfortable with, okay? Next, you can actually attempt the vocabulary in context questions. That's right. Even without reading the passage, attempting the vocabulary questions gives you a certain comfort level with what the passage is talking about. And because it's in context, just reading those few lines is sufficient for you to answer this question correctly. Then you can move on to attempt the line number or the questions that reference the line numbers. And you do this in a chronological order. So you do it starting with the earlier line numbers and go on to the later line numbers. And then you can attempt the evidence-based questions. And these come in pairs. And I will show you an example today. And then now that you've done all of this and you've gotten a good idea of the passage from various angles, you can string all these insights together, and then you can answer the central idea question, which actually comes right up front. Okay, I know this is a little in the reverse order, so to speak, but we find that this strategy works very well for students who are, who've not been avid readers and analyzers of large pieces of text. So if this is you, do try this out and let me know how it works. I'd love to hear from you as to whether this worked for you. Okay, so let's also move on to question types, and there are different strategies for different question types. Okay. I would actually like to give you share with you a couple of strategies today. So let me help you. Let me share our strategy for vocabulary in context questions. So this is actually the most simple question type on the SAT reading section, and they always appear with a line number reference. So you will know which line you have to read from the passage to answer this question. So the way the question works is, you are required to study the word in the given context and then find an equivalent word for it. Okay, it doesn't mean you have to find a synonym for this word. You have to find that which word among the answer choices when substituted in place of this word will still give the same meaning as intended by the author. Okay, so the strategy that we advise for vocabulary in context questions is just read in the neighborhood of the line number that's given to you, the line number where the word is. So you read the sentence before and after, or if it's a long sentence, maybe just that one sentence. Then you omit this word from its current position. So you mentally blank it out, right? Or you can kind of strike it out on the paper with a pencil if you wish. Having omitted this word and having read the sentence and gotten the context, you have to come up with a word of your own for the blank. You have to anticipate the word. In other words, do not look at the answer choices yet, okay? You will have to anticipate and come up with your own words. It could be a phrase, it could be a single word. Come up with your own word for the blank and only then look at the answer choices to eliminate the options which don't match the word that you had anticipated, okay? I hope these steps are clear. You read around the context of the word, then you omit the word from its current position, and then you anticipate what word could best fit in this blank without looking at the answer choices. And then using what you have the word or phrase you've come up with, then you start comparing the answer choices to rule them out. And finally, there will be one left, which will be the correct answer. Make sense? All right. So a nice acronym is ROAR, R-O-A-R, and that is a strategy that we will apply in this question. So if you look at this passage here, the blurb on top says that this passage is adapted from an article published in the Environment News section of Brown University's official website. Nice. But if you notice, I have actually left out the first 40 lines or more of the passage, okay? And the only reason I've done that, well, one is for brevity because today we don't have that much time. But more importantly, I've done that because I wanted to show you how you can answer a vocabulary in context question without necessarily reading the entire passage. Okay. Again, like I said before, if you are the kind who loves reading the entire passage from the beginning, it helps you get the whole thing better, that's fine. But in this case, I just want to show you how you can do it by just reading the context. Okay. So let's read the question first. As used in line 53, persistent most nearly means what? Okay, I said most nearly means what? I do not want you to actually read any of this. Please do not read the answer choices at this stage. Remember, we're going to follow the strategy. We're going to go to the passage. We're going to go to line 53, near it, and we're going to follow the steps of ROAR. So let's do that. Okay. So line 53, let's read what's happening there. Again, a little before it, so you get the context, right? This monitoring provided a long and continuous data set for the researchers to study. Yeah, I've highlighted this portion here so you can see where I'm reading. In particular, the team was interested in data from seismic sensors located near the volcano's crater. Those sensors pick up volcanic tremor, a low-level seismic rumble that provides a persistent signal of activity within a volcanic system. So I hope you got an idea of the context. There are no difficult words or high vocabulary words here, right? So let's now follow the steps. So we've read this part, okay? And again, I want to stress that you should not start reading these and say, hey, which of these months means persistent? Because it might happen that many of them mean persistent, right? Repetitive does mean persistent, right? Someone, if they're very persistent in asking to borrow money from you, then they're going to repeatedly ask you, right? That means they're persistent. Okay, steady definitely means persistent, right? That's true. Frequent, yes, something frequent can also be persistent over time. Lasting means it lasts for a long time. A lasting friendship, persistent courtship. So yeah, it is lasting. So all of these, now you will get confused. All of them sound a lot like persistent, and that is why we tell you to not read the answer choices until you have done the step of anticipating the answer choice. So let's actually do that. Okay. So step 2 is we will omit the word. Okay. We will just put a blank where you can see that in place of persistent, you've put a little blank here. And we're now going to come up with our own word or phrase, and that will be the anticipate step. Okay. So let's read what's happening. So these sensors, okay, which are located near the volcano's crater, these sensors pick up volcanic tremor, a low-level seismic rumble that provides a blank signal of activity within a volcanic system. And remember, the previous line says this monitoring provided a long and continuous data set for the researchers to study. So you must have continuous activity. Right? The signal has to, you have to pick up some activity continuously. So a good word that you want to plug in there could be continuous. Or maybe you came up with constant, right? Or something that's always happening, right? So let's go with continuous. If any of you if you faced a difficulty coming to this conclusion, then I would be happy to clarify it towards the end of this session. Okay, so or we can even discuss after the question. So I hope you can see why continuous is fits in well with this blank right here, because now when you read it back, the sensors pick up volcanic tremor, a low-level seismic rumble that provides a continuous signal of activity. Okay, then now you're going to rule out each answer choice to see which of these gives us the sense of continuous. Okay, so if you take a repetitive, okay, does repetitive mean continuous? Well, it doesn't mean continuous, right? I might come and ask you, something today, and then a month later or a week later, I can ask you again, right? I can keep asking you, but not all the time. So repetitive is not the same as continuous. So now you're able to see the nuance here, right? And you will find a lot of nuance when it comes to vocabulary. And we would strongly recommend that you form a good foundation for vocabulary, and I will I would actually recommend that you build your vocabulary so you can get the nuances straight. And just to give you an idea of what sources that you might have to build your vocabulary, I would, for example, here is my iPad, and on the iOS or Android, whichever device you have, you could search for vocabulary, and you will notice that right in the top 10 apps is the Ultimate Vocabulary Builder. That's an app that we built at Galvanize, and this is actually the highest rated vocabulary app at 4.8 out of 5 stars. I'm not sure if you can see it very clearly, but this does a great job of building your vocabulary for 1,800 words, and it does so in a gamified, engaging manner. So if you're more at a foundational stage, then this is something that you can use to improve your vocabulary. Okay, so let's move on to the next word, which is steady. And steady definitely sounds a lot like continuous, right? Steady friendship, continuous friendship. I mean, some words will obviously suit the context better. So let's keep steady on hold, and let's make sure we rule out the other two. Frequent. Well, frequent is something that's happening very often. It's like repetitive, but at a higher frequency, right? That's why it's called frequent. So again, it is not the same as continuous. And lasting, for something to be lasting, it has to have a sense of permanence, right? A lasting friendship, and that a lasting legacy. So here we're not looking at the nature of permanence, but the fact that it's always on. There's always data coming out, and therefore we will stick to the choice B, which is steady, and that is the answer that you're looking for. Sounds good? Any questions? All right, let us move to the next question type that I would like to cover today. And these are the evidence-based questions. So what is an evidence-based question? And in fact, I shouldn't say what is an evidence-based question. Actually, they come in pairs. So you will find two questions, right? The first question is what we like to call a finding information question, where you will have to find some information. And the second question, which immediately follows the finding information question, is the finding evidence question, where you have to find evidence for the information in the previous question. Okay, so it is important to understand the distinction between these two questions, and you will understand it better when I show you an example. But essentially, the first question tries to evaluate if you know a particular piece of information, and the second question asks you for a specific sentence from the passage which on the basis of which you came up with the information for the previous question. Make sense? Let's actually look at an example. And before that, let me outline a strategy which you can use to answer this question. Okay? And just keep in mind that the information that you're seeking is unlikely to be explicitly stated in the passage. You will have to, again, connect the dots, and that's why our strategy will help. So first, you have to find what I like to call the task of the finding information question. Okay, it's like the first one. That's finding information, right? And you have to find the task of the question. What does the question want you to do? Next, you go to the finding evidence question, and there will be some 4 sets of line numbers mentioned there. And you read all of these line numbers in the passage. You read these lines in the passage. And as you read these lines in the passage, you try to evaluate each line to see if it provides the answer for the task of the finding information question. Okay, so notice as of now, we have not yet looked at the answer choices in the finding information question. We're just looking at the answer choices in the finding evidence question, which are essentially line numbers in the passage. And you're going to go read those lines and see which of those lines provides the answer for the finding information question. Okay, so let's actually put the strategy to practice. And just as an acronym, you can think of it like an info, task, evidence, and matching. But I think as we apply the strategy, it might be easier for you to remember this. So let's look at an evidence-based question. Once again, I've taken the same section of this passage. And you don't have to read it from the beginning. Although, if you love doing that, awesome. Okay, so let's look at the finding information question first. The author's attitude towards something. So clearly, this question is about the author's attitude towards something. So this is what we call the tone question, right? The author's attitude or feeling towards something. Okay. So about what? What do they want to know the author's attitude about? Well, towards the idea of the tidal cycle being a strong indicator of certain types of volcanic activity. Can be best described as what, right? So please don't read these answer choices right now. Let's just try and understand what the question wants us to do. And the next question you see here, which is, like I said, they come in a pair, right? They always come in pairs. The next question says, which sentence provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? And it will always be worded this way. Okay, that's how you know that these two form an evidence question pair. And you will notice here that the answer choices are always lines from the passage. And they give you line numbers as well as the starting and the ending words or phrases to make it easier for you to locate the line number. So you are expected to go back to the passage and read each of these line numbers. So let's apply our strategy. What's the first step? You want to find the task of the finding information question. right? The info task. So in the info task, when you're going to find what's the task that they're setting up for you here. So the task of the find information question is, well, there is an idea that's being talked about, that the tidal cycle is a strong indicator of certain types of volcanic activity, right? Towards the idea of something, okay? And they want to know what the author's attitude or feeling is towards this idea, okay? So what does the author feel about a particular idea? So in other words, this is a tone question, and for tone questions, you can use our neat little tone spectrum to identify, or as a basis on which you will try and peg the author's tone. So tones of authors usually vary from absolutely positive, hopeful, somewhat hopeful, optimistic, skeptical, not so hopeful, and then definitely against, right? On the SAT, you're unlikely to find a very, very neutral tone. Usually it's going to be on one, either positive or negative. So you will have to, you have to find what the tone of the author is towards what? Not towards the volcano itself, but towards this idea, right? Towards the idea that the tidal cycle is a strong indicator of certain types of volcanic activities. So now that we understand the task of the information question, let us go to the evidence question, okay? So remember, you will have to read each answer choice, go back to the passage, and then see if it's giving, if this line gives you a way to answer the, this gives you a way to answer the task of the information question. In other words, you will read each of these lines and see if they help you answer, or if they help you find out what the author feels about this idea, about the idea that tidal cycles can, and the volcanic eruptions, right? Okay, so let us read lines 56 to 59. They found that for most of those 12 years, there was no correlation between tremor and tidal cycles, except the few months before a steam-driven eruption in September 2007, when a strong correlation emerged. Okay, so over the 12-year period, there was no correlation. Remember, the question is all about finding whether there's a correlation between the tidal cycles and the volcanic tremors. But for most of those 12 years, there was no correlation, except that when the volcano is about to erupt, there was a correlation. Okay, a strong correlation emerged. Now, does this tell you exactly what the author feels about this idea? Well, I would say that the feeling is not strong enough. Okay, yes, the author has used the phrase a strong correlation. Okay, but I think we can do better. Let's go to the other lines and see if there's something even stronger than strong correlation. So the next sentence, lines 59 to 61. During those 3 months, the amplitude of tremor rose and fell ever so slightly in lockstep with the fortnightly tidal cycle. So there is a correlation, right? The tidal cycle and the amplitude of the tremor, they did have some, there was a correlation. They were in lockstep, okay? So yes, there is a correlation, okay? But I still think we can do better, because the feeling, there's no feeling, or probably feeling is not the exact term. There's no conviction or certainty yet, right? So let's continue and read the next line. While the fluctuations in seismic amplitude were subtle, the strength of the correlation to the tidal cycle was not. In other words, the correlation was extremely strong, right? Now, this seems to be like evidence, and this seems to be, there seems to be a lot of conviction here. But let's just read the next choice and see if it gives us anything better. And the next choice says, the correlation was as strong as 5 sigma, the researchers say, meaning that the probability that this pattern arose by chance is about 1 in 3.5 million. Now that sounds like a very strong conviction, right? Because this is evidence with data. Right? The author says that these two signals, they have to be correlated, because the fact that we're seeing this just out of random is like 1 in 3.5 million. That's the odds. So clearly they are correlated, right? So there is evidence, there are numbers, and the author is super convinced, and this is the sentence that's going to give you the answer, right, to the finding information question. Okay, so we're now going to the previous question, and now use the tone spectrum to understand the author's attitude towards the idea. Okay, what is the idea? That the tidal cycle can be a strong indicator of certain types of volcanic activity. So before you know how you know that a volcano is going to erupt, if you keep measuring the tidal cycles, can it give you an indication or a clue of volcanic activity? And the author is so positive and convinced that this could not have happened out of random chance, and they're actually giving you a nice big number to prove that, to back it up. And therefore, what do you think is the author's attitude or the author's belief in this? Is the author ambivalent? Not sure, maybe iffy. Is the author iffy? Definitely not. The author is giving you a huge, a lot of, I would say, a very strong evidence to back his or her claim. Is the author contemplative? Is the author just thinking, hey, let's just think about this, let's study it, let's analyze it? No, the author's actually said, look, we've done the analysis and here are the numbers, and see this correlation is so strong. Okay, so it cannot be contemplative. Is the author optimistic? That sounds like the answer. The author definitely feels positive that this correlation is there and it could help us. And is the author pessimistic? Definitely no. There is no trace of negativity in the author's attitude here. So the answer here is optimistic. Okay, and we will go with answer choice C.